Hello YouTube, Tim here. What I've got is gelatin, a thumb ring, a bowl, and a scale. What I'm planning on trying is casting the thumb ring that I made, which is basically an acceptable, pretty good shape, a tiny bit on the tight side, especially if I was going to put a little piece of leather in there. This would definitely be a little bit too small, but it's basically right. I can draw a 60-pound bow with not comfort yet, but 40 to 50 pound quite comfortably. Yeah, it's very nice. It's a good thumb ring. So to get the basic shape, I'm going to cast it in acrylic, or some polyester resin. But I need to mold it first, make the mold. So to make the mother mold, what I was planning on doing is using some gelatin. Each of these packets, by my calculations, should be about 7.2 grams. Let's find out if that's true. Switch it over to the gram side and tear. Alright. Six, a little bit light, but there's still some hiding in there. Oh, there we go. Okay, so 7 grams is pretty reasonable. Let's see if this next one brings it up to 15, and then I'll empty the next two simultaneously. These are just standard Knox gelatin. I'm not endorsing that brand, but it is a brand, and it's a brand that works. Common as dirt. So it looks like they're a little bit light, half ounce. Almost perfect. It's almost exactly half an ounce per packet. Okay, so we have 30 grams of gelatin. That's probably more than we're going to need. What we're going to do is we're going to mix it with 3 times its weight in sugar, as well as 3 times its weight in water. That'll allow us to create a nice, really stiff gelatin that should work. You know, you've played with regular Jell-O, soft. Knox blocks or Jell-O jigglers, much firmer. You can pick them up and wiggle them. Even that consistency might be adequate. To that amount, they add 1 cup of cold fruit juice and 3 cups of heated fruit juice. So really you can see 4 cups, 1 cup per packet. We're only going to be doing about, let's see, what is it, 30 grams? Oh, this is going to be extremely, extremely different. So, like I said, 3 times that. Call it 100 grams, not even a half cup of water. I'm going to go ahead and bloom the gelatin in the water right now. And all that entails is take your water, like so. Let's tear it. I know it's 29 grams, call it 30. And so we're just going to add triple that weight in water. I'll even add a tiny bit extra because I'm feeling generous. There we go. 90. Let's make it an even 100. There we go. 100 grams. Now, before that gets out of control, this is going to turn to sludgy soup really quickly. Look at that. It's beautiful, really. This is a nice way. Usually I'm not used to mixing it quite so much with so little water. But that's about what you expect to happen. This is collagen. Lovely stuff. You're made of it. Which explains why it melts at body temperature. So, let's take that now. And we will heat it a little bit. Once it's hot, we will add some sugar. We're going to gently heat this in the microwave. I won't actually show that since it's not terribly exciting. All I'm going to be doing is putting it in for little 30-second bouts until it's starting to melt, then you stir, and then you gently, gently, gently heat it. You don't want to heat it too much. The gelatin will break down. So I'm going to go do that, and then we'll get back to business. Just as an example, here we are with more like 15 seconds in a microwave. Mine's only, I think, a 900-watt microwave. And you see how most of it is already liquid. This would not be a tasty Jell-O. I would not recommend eating this stuff. Although after we add the sugar, it probably wouldn't taste all that bad. Still, it's going to taste like boiled pigskin or horse hoof or whatever it happens to be made out of. So let's just make sure we can scrape down the sides. If you really want to do a nice job, use a spatula, not a fork. This is a really half-ass way to do it, but forgive me. We're not in pastry mode yet. Maybe that'll come next week. If anybody's been following, I do have plans to start doing a little bit of chocolate on the side. Okay, I'm going to give it another 10 or 15 seconds in the microwave. And in the meanwhile, let's go and get the sugar now. We're just going to measure out the same amount of sugar as we did water. That would be, in this case, 100 grams. And again, less is alright. There's no reason to use a full 100 grams. Let's see. If you're measuring by volume for some reason, which is okay, 100 grams of sugar is approximately 1/2 cup. Great. That looks lovely. This is going to be quite a lot more gelatin than I had envisioned originally. I thought 4 packets wouldn't make all that much. The original recipe that I'm scaling down was for casting a wine bottle. So as you can imagine, you need quite a lot. We're talking like 11 cups of sugar, 10 cups of water. I'm not going to be precise since, like I said, we know that it's approximately 100 grams. Great. Yeah, that's an awful lot. So, to prevent the obvious mishap that I can see happening in the very near future, let's transfer it into a new vessel. A more appropriate vessel. Great. And at this point, we are ready to stir it all together and heat it until the sugar dissolves, and then we can start casting. This is not going to be all that difficult. The last time that I've cast anything with gelatin was 2005, and I was making shells to mold chocolate with. It turned out very well. But it has been a while. See here on the bottom, the gelatin's sticking. Again, you really should be careful how you add, and I'm not used to adding so little water for so much gelatin. Gelatin's starting to set and dehydrate, by the way. That's another thing. Adding the sugar, the gelatin is going to be dehydrated by the sugar. So this is a very interesting, almost confection we're making. I'd bet if you decided to whip it, as it was from liquid, you would get a nice marshmallow, something similar. Great. Look at that goo. Okay. Let's stick this back in the microwave, and then I will show you the result. We'll skip right to that. Here we are. Nice, liquefied, not too hot gelatin. Here we have what I was planning on using as the vessel to make the molding. We'll later turn it out. This had some advantages. Now that I know I have quite so much, I actually could use a whole number of other vessels, including something like the cup itself that I was planning on only using as a secondary sort of feature. This was going to be used to later cast the acrylic, but, well, let's continue with my plan, and we can always remelt it and play along later. To start with, I'm going to take some of the gelatin and just pour it into here to coat the bottom and sides. There you go. Now I'm just going to let that harden. I'm going to stick this back in the freezer. Or fridge is fine. Such a small amount will solidify fairly rapidly. This stage is going to be helpful to allow us to set this on the bottom without touching the bottom. Actually, if you set it on an angle, then you won't even have a problem later where you're trying to get this top part even with the top surface. The instructions that I've seen use alginate, and that's another method that I'm going to demonstrate later. I'm going to try it myself, and I expect no problems. I think that'll even go easier than this. But we're going to start with what we have, since this is common and, well, heck. I've got lots of fallbacks if this doesn't work out too well. We're going to go do that. So then later on we can try the alginate, we can try casting in plaster, anything. That doesn't really matter. For what it's worth, I also made a thumb ring for my wife using the same material. This one's not quite so well formed. It needs to be shaped a little bit, but for her it's good and even protects her finger with her slightly longer nails better. Something I found amusing. My pinky is exactly the same size as her thumb. Cool though. Anyway, it works really well and I think she's going to like that. Let's go check on our Jell-O back in the fridge. Take a look at that. You can see how it's set all along the sides. Another maybe 5 minutes and this will be completely set. We can just continually warm this. If you have a bain-marie or a water bath, you can keep this at a nice temperature. You don't want to keep it super hot, but you also don't want to let it set completely. If it's somewhat set around the edges, don't worry, just take your gelatin from the middle. And remember, you can always just heat it again. Now that it's mixed with the liquid, the gelatin's finely dispersed throughout the mixture. It's a colloid, and it'll be really easy to reheat and remelt it again. If you might have to add a tiny bit of extra water, but I wouldn't worry too much. It's fairly simple. That is pretty close to perfect. Oh, here. So this is the gelatin that went along the side. Completely solid. Just going to put that back in the main bowl. How interesting. Wow, this stuff is strong. Stretchy but strong. You can wonder, or now I think it makes it clear, more clear and obvious how it's such an excellent glue. If anybody has any feedback or suggestions as to how this might be used as a furniture or wood glue, I'd love to hear it. It's something that's very fascinating to me. So we have the nearly completely set now gelatin. Let's go ahead and set that in there. Great. And now, let's use the spoon to stream in some gelatin. Inside, outside, all around, up to the top. If you cover it a little, that's fine. You're just going to end up pulling it out anyway. Yeah, basically it should settle off just off the surface. Add a little bit more. One other thing of note, well worth noting, is that there's a small problem with gelatin. You see all this foam? Gelatin's a protein. A lot of these proteins like this are excellent at foaming and entraining air in a solution. So when they're in a colloid like this, you can whip them. It's how you make marshmallows. It's how you do things like that. But unfortunately, that's bad for making molds. You don't want bubbles. One way to get to reduce the number of bubbles is to stream it from a little bit higher. When you increase the surface area, it makes it easier for the bubbles to disperse. Also, just don't whip it when you're mixing it. Don't beat in air. Try and be as careful as you can. All we're going to do is let this sit. We'll come back, and then we can see what we've got. Welcome back, YouTube. Here we are. I've let this set for about 20 minutes now. It's still not completely cold, but it's definitely cool, and it's definitely set. Let's see if we can squeeze it out for starters. Maybe just gently edging it with a knife. Also careful not to scratch or damage the measuring cup. That would be unfortunate, since it's a nice measuring cup. Okay, this is looking very good. Let's just see what happens if I give it a good squeeze. I don't know. From the edge, looks like I can pull it back quite a way. I can see this going wrong in so many ways if I just squeeze it up. So let's just try and lever it out. Here it comes. Can you tell what size cup that was? Cool. So there it is. It's totally done, totally ready. You can let it continue to sit. The gelatin will continue to harden a little bit for at least a few hours, if not a day. But at this strength, I don't think you're going to need to wait too much longer. All I'm going to do is I'm going to line this bowl with some saran wrap, some plastic film, not to protect it from the gelatin, no, but to protect it from any spillage that I might get later when I decide to cast acrylic with it. No, okay, we have two problems. Problem one, my thumb ring is in there. Problem two, it's covered over. I expected that, and that's really my fault for not being a little bit more careful. But I figured we would do it, and then we could cut away material off the top when the time came to it. So we can see it right there. There's the thumb ring. Let's just see if we can trim the top just a tiny bit. That's not going to work. It's more tearing than anything. So let's just see if we can cut on the material down to the Instamorph. Okay, now here's an idea. If the gelatin is being uncooperative, run the knife under hot water. So I'm going to let my sink run for a moment, heat up, and do that. You'll see it'll cut much more easily and evenly. The fringe benefit is that rather than cutting, it's going to be melting the gelatin. And then, of course, the gelatin, as it cools, can simply re-solidify. So let's give that a try. Did that make a difference? Not much. I do have a tool which would work for that. A heated knife. But I don't plan on using it. Darn, look at that. That is just so cool. Okay. I think the problem was I just wasn't being aggressive enough. I was afraid of damaging it, and I wasn't going low enough on it to where the teeth on this knife could bite. Here we go. Now we're talking. Now we're in business. We're right down to the material. Right down to the Instamorph. Okay. Let's cut a little bit more boldly. Read rapidly. Heck, just tear this away. You can set that aside and deal with it later. This is not the ideal way to do this. Really, you should make sure that it's showing enough so that you can grab the edge of the ring and coax it out. But this will work. Again, I don't mind making mistakes on camera as long as I, and hopefully you, can learn from them. It's rather like filleting a fish or something. It's almost the right texture. As an aside note, this is probably fairly similar to ballistic gelatin.
Just 1 more minute, okay?
You need to be careful if you are planning on using it for that purpose, though. Okay, I think we're basically there. Let me go ahead now and see if I can pull this out. If I can, we can call it a night, get back and actually try and cast it. See, we are making progress. The Instamorph is a very nice medium for something like this. It doesn't complain a lot, and it doesn't scratch very easily. If it does, you just heat it a tiny bit, and the scratches come right out. Let's see if we can get this to slide right out like I think it will. You do have to be careful, but arranged so, it should simply extract. There we go. Now I'm just going to clean that off, and we will be in business. Superb. Alright. Now I don't know if that's going to be how good this is going to work. But there's only one way to find out. So tune in again, and we're going to make some thumb rings if everything goes to plan. Thanks for watching, YouTube.